Is the Kick the Shit podcast. Each week, my guests and I will share our stories around the social and emotional impacts that addiction can have on both ourselves and our loved ones. Let's go! Welcome. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Welcome to the show, Drew and Matt. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good, thanks, mate.
Awesome, brother. Thank you for having us.
I just stuffed up that intro. Actually, it was still playing halfway through the last one, but that's all good, mate. People know why we're here. Guys, everyone out there listening, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to another episode of Kick the Shit podcast. Today, we have Drew and Matt joining us. We're going to dive into some of their stories from addiction to recovery and some of the work that they're doing now. As I was just playing up there on the screen, guys, let me just put this back up here on screen. We've got Line in the Sand. And I notice there's another person in this image just here that's not with us today. We'll probably talk a little more about that. But Drew, where are you guys watching from? Drew?
Brother, I'm
Matt?
on the Sunshine Coast, and Matt, you're down in Bendigo, aren't you?
Rural Vic, yeah.
Cool. We're three different states coming together to share the carnage of addiction. Drew, let's kick it off. We were just having a little chat before we just hit the live button, and we were talking about some of the madness of addiction. I thought we'll just spend the next couple of minutes. Why don't you talk me through your lowest of low, your rock bottom? Like how far down the hole did you go, mate?
Oh man, yeah, I've bounced along the bottom for years. I think the one partner and person that you were talking about, Ryan, who isn't with us today, talks about, I don't believe we have one rock bottom. I certainly had about 3 dozen along the way. But man, that varied. Anytime I chose to pick up to drink to use, it was like rolling the dice on my life. And it was like, I call it like playing a game of Russian roulette. Like I never knew where I'd end up. It could start with like, someone suggesting, hey, let's go for a drink. And then it was like 3 months later, I find myself literally like living in my fucking car, driving from dealer to dealer, bottle store to bottle store, just trying, just like fucking survival, man. Absolute survival.
Well, I'm just thinking of some of those times of me living in my car too. You just give me a memory. I remember living in a car out the front of this Buddhist temple, and with a girlfriend too, like literally living in the back seat of the car. Wow. And where else did you end up? Where else would you have ended up, Drew?
Oh man, that was when I was, housed. It was just, a lot of it's a blur. If I'm being really honest with you, bro. But I wouldn't be leaving my room. The curtains were shut.
Yep.
I was in such a like perpetual state of absolute paranoia, fear, and anxiety that like I wouldn't even fucking leave my room to go to the toilet. I was pissing in the fucking corner of my room. Like that's how bad it was. Vomiting down the side of my fucking bed, waking up, just doing whatever I could, whatever I needed to ultimately get myself into that place of oblivion, which was disconnection. And that's sort of the core of a lot of what we talk about is like I was seeking that disconnection from my own personal discomfort that I felt within myself, these pains, these feelings, these emotions that I had no fucking clue what to do with, bro. And so, I took myself that far, literally just to try to solve this the only way that I knew how to really medicate myself. That's what I was doing.
What was your drug of choice, Drew? What were you using and abusing?
I mean, everything and anything. Towards the end, it was more alcohol because I moved to a small town to try to get away from drugs.
Yeah.
And the drugs weren't there, but I was living in New Zealand, bro. And New Zealand's as bad as Australia. Even a small town population of maybe 6,000, there's still 4 or 5 bottle stores.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was booze and benzos.
Booze and benzos. Yeah, I once moved to Fiji to get away from the drugs, and it's true I couldn't find the drugs, but I became an alcoholic overnight. And previous to that, I didn't even drink. So yeah, that's what we do. We will find something to change the way we feel. Always. Yeah. Matt, what about you, mate? Talk us through some of your rock bottom, some of your lowest of low, bro? What was your drug of choice?
My drug of choice was mainly heroin and Xanax. Towards the end, anyway, like handful of Xannies, have a shot of heroin, and fucking. My favorite place to be was between unconscious and dead. And if I wasn't there, I was in fucking agony, you know, like if I wasn't there, I was seeking to get there with every particle, you know, of my being. But when you said like the lowest of lows, like, mate, like it was just one after another, you know. I like a couple memories, you know, came to mind. One's like, you know, trying to cold turkey from Xanax and fucking seizuring on the floor, turning blue, and my heart stopped. You know, been dead like 6 times, you know, when my heart stopped. Had to be Narcaned a bunch of times. But, you know, like another memory came to mind. Like I'd just gotten out of prison and I'd been up for days on mushrooms and ice, like mixed together. And I went into a full-blown psychosis. Thought my parole house was made of drugs. So started like trying to get the bricks out of the wall. Thought they were giant Xanax. Smashed a window. Thought it was ice. Pulled out plaster, thought it was heroin, and started shooting like bits of the fucking house. And it like ended up in a psych ward. So like that would say, you know, would be a low point, but I still went for another fucking like 8 years after that, you know. It kept getting worse. Like by the end I had no friends left. Everyone had either turned on me or was dead or in jail, and I was in rehab for the 17th attempt, and sitting there watching the news and seeing my mate had just got sentenced to 17 years. And he was one of my last friends. And I remember the anxiety that hit me. Like I was running to the toilet, trying to vomit up the anxiety. My head convinced me there was something fucking entity in my belly. So I'm in the toilet trying to spew. And then every night, just the torment, like my head begging me to leave, like just fucking go leave, like go use. You know, and having to sit there, like just being tortured, like by my own mind for weeks. I ended up spending 18 months that time in transitional housing. You know, I've been in recovery since, but man, like it was just like fucking dips of lows, like really intense, hectic levels of like existential despair, you know, that I hit, and then I'd use, and it'd sort of, you know, be not so bad for a bit because I was able to get on all the time, and then something else hectic would happen and it would just traumatize me even more. So it was just like fucking ping-ponging, you know, through layers of hell for years, like free falling. It was fucked.
Wow, man, that's pretty intense. Hey, so Matt, like when you're talking through some of those side effects of the drugs, like heroin and Xanax doesn't do that, but does it? The heroin certainly doesn't. The Xanax cause some of that
Psychosis?
Yeah, the psychosis.
No, it doesn't. Xanax
what's
would
that?
Well, I was on mushrooms and ice
Yeah,
that
it's
time.
the mushrooms and ice. It's such and I just point that out because that's the thing. Like heroin, Xanax is like it's pretty chill, you know. But once you start messing with the ice and certainly the mushies and that stuff, that's the stuff where people just go loopy, isn't it?
Yeah,
and long term effects as well.
Well, look, like I think mushrooms can have like real medicinal qualities and stuff, but like mixing them with methamphetamine and sleep deprivation, like it wasn't done with like a shaman in like a ceremonial setting. Like I was fucking losing the plot. But you know, like ice is a very different drug. Like that Xanax would make me black out for days. Like I have chunks of my life missing because of Xanax. Like you know, wake up in a cop shop or in a prison cell, not knowing how the fuck I got there, you know. I'm still not knowing, you know. It's just blackout. And so Xanax would, you know, cause me to do all that sort of stuff. Heroin, I'd just zonk out on the couch, you know. But heroin, it was like the lifestyle that came with it, you know. Like got to the point I was breaking into fucking syringe bins in public toilets to try and get fits out to use because I couldn't be bothered waiting to get to the pharmacy. You know, just like that level of desperation and no care whether I lived or died. It's like just like a walking, you know, zombie, like just with a death wish. It's like zero care. It's like not like I wanted to die, but I had zero care whether I did or didn't.
Yeah, I relate, mate. I relate. That sounds like that's what heroin does. That's what it did to me as well too. All right, cool, mate. So, and you ended up staying in recovery from that last. You mentioned transitional housing then, Matt, is that when you entered recovery? Have you maintained recovery since that point?
Yeah. So I was
Wow.
in a 12-step program for 2 years. I'm not in 12-step now. I haven't been for probably
Okay,
about
yeah,
5
cool.
years. So I'm not
Oh,
abstinence based. Like I don't
yeah,
drink or anything. Like I haven't had a drink in
yeah.
about a year, but I'm not abstinent based. Like I don't
Good.
mind if I do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I've been in recovery since then. I haven't fallen back into active addiction. And like I've done mushrooms, ayahuasca, a few other things in recovery in a more ceremonial setting. But my life now is about healing trauma. That's
Yeah,
something
right.
I live, every moment of my life. It's what I work, the field I work in. And I think healing trauma and addiction recovery go hand in hand. We can be clean from drugs, but if we're not doing that kind of deeper work on what drove the addiction, to me, that's kind of a dry recovery.
Yeah, cool. I want to talk some more about that. Drew, what about you? What would you call, how do you, yeah, I just heard Matt talk about he doesn't class himself as being in abstinence-based recovery. What kind of recovery? It's a funny question, actually. Just by the way, I am a total abstinence-based recovery. What kind of recovery you got, Drew?
I mean, I'd say the same. I don't really label it even as the truth of the matter actually
It's
is
great.
I don't even label it recovery anymore. I
Yeah.
don't we use that word in a lot of, the way in which we speak and when we deliver because it's relatable to a lot of people in this space. But for me, like I just call it my journey, man. Like my journey of healing, my journey of, self-discovery, whatever that is. Like it's become so far removed from focusing on, let's say, the addiction or the drugs or the alcohol. Like that doesn't exist in me anymore. It's not something I'm focusing on. And it's about, like for Matt was saying, for me, it's much more about this exploration of what was driving that in the first place. For in the early phases, don't get me wrong, just like Matt, it was very much 12-step based and 12-step orientated. And it was for the first time I was in rehab was 22 years old. The second time was 29 years old, both 12-step based rehabilitation centers, which served their purpose at the time. And I loved and really enjoyed. It was, the first time I really got to experience what it meant to take a look in here. But what I felt was always missing was this piece, like no one could answer this why. Why? I always had this question. I've always been a curious kid, ever since I was young. And I've questioned everything in my life. And no one could really give me a distinctive answer as to why I was the one in the position I was. Surrounded with all the friends that I had, using, drinking, partying, behaving and engaging in the same behaviors just as much as I was. Why am I the one sitting in rehab? What is it within me that got me in this position and took it that much further than everybody else? So it was always this wanting to understand the driving force, and in that starting to recognize that, the addiction or the vice or the coping mechanism or the behavioral response was literally just a symptom of this deeper rooted problem. Someone who we both really deeply revere is Gabor Mate, and he always says, it's not why the addiction, but why the pain. If we can start looking at why the pain or why the fucking discomfort, or why is it so painful and punishing to just be with myself, then all of a sudden the symptom just starts to disappear. Does that make sense?
Interesting, man. Yeah, it does. It does. And mate, it's just got me thinking. Like, first of all, when you say the why bit, maybe you're the lucky one as well out of all those other people that didn't make it to rehab too, because you now have this opportunity, and this is definitely the way I see life. Like, look at us, look at you today, look at you guys. Like, why?
100%.
Maybe you're actually the blessed one, and furthermore, all those other people that you might have mentioned, and let me know what you think, but maybe they have still got all that madness that you just spoke about, but just untreated and aren't even truly aware of it,
Oh, dude,
So
I say this every single day. Like I'm so grateful for the fact that I chose a particular vice that like fucked up my life so badly. I had no other choice, but it was like live or
sure,
die.
yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah.
like die or heal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that every single day. I'm like, fuck, awesome. I literally shook myself to the core so deeply that I got to that line in the sand moment where it's like, okay, I'm choosing to do something different. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people, maybe the behavior doesn't get that bad, or they're coping mechanism. Think of people that maybe food, for instance, porn, gambling, things like this. They're not in their core going to actually kill you. Porn, gambling, especially. And so it's like, what is that tipping point for some of these guys? It can be a lot more nuanced and layered. I'm like, it was very clear and evident. I had two fucking choices.
For me, I guess
Yeah.
for me, like he's, and they say this in 12 step, like the drug is the solution to a problem. Like heroin for me was like, I used to say it's like a big hug from mum, like it would just make everything feel okay. Like I'd feel fucking distressed. Like imagine a baby screaming, crying, having a tantrum, fucking in like this pit of despair, feeling completely helpless and out of control. And then mum comes in the room, picks it up. It's like, it's okay. It's okay. And that's what heroin gave me. So I say heroin actually saved my life for many
Me too.
years. It stopped me from
Absolutely.
killing myself, like, because my fucking inner state was just one of just existential despair constantly and existential terror, like panic. And I would ping between this despair and this terror all day. And heroin was the only thing that regulated that. It brought me out of it. And so what is that existential terror and despair? That's trauma. That's what trauma does to the nervous system. And so you take the heroin away, all the recovery programs I went to, that didn't deal with that underlying terror and despair, all the rehabs and stuff, they focused on heroin as the problem, and it was like, take the drug away. It's like taking the mum away from a screaming baby, and what I was left with was that torment. And it felt like having no fucking skin, walking around, having no skin, just being totally fucking naked in a state of like infant vulnerability, like as fucking helpless as an infant. And so I'd walk around like that, and people were like, oh, good, you've quit heroin. It's like, fuck, mate. Like all I want to do is pick it back up again, like understandably. And it wasn't until I started to work with that underlying torment, that underlying sense of terror and despair that was like fucking gripping my system constantly. When I started to learn to work with that, to regulate it, to discharge some of the traumatic stress. Remember the first time I was in somatic based trauma therapy, working through a memory of, me finding someone I cared about dead from a heroin overdose, and felt my system go into the panic, when I would bring back the memory. And then I felt it complete. I was able to stay with it, stay present with it, regulate out of it. And I felt that whole experience discharge and leave my body. And it was, And I was like, this is why I use. Straight away, I could see using does this same thing for me. It regulates me out of that stress, And it's interesting because I wouldn't even need to use the heroin. It was like I'd be fucking driving in withdrawal, nose running, dry reaching, all of that sort of stuff, fucking going through red lights, everything. And then as soon as I'd get the gear, put it in my pocket, I wouldn't even need to use it. I'd just go, something would relax. It was like, oh, the teddy, mum's here, mum's here. It's like,
Wow.
And so my nervous system would relax out of trauma. So heroin, it kept me alive. It stopped me from killing myself. 100% would have. But we demonize these substances like they are the problem, but they're not the addiction. The compulsion to use them, that need, that desperation, it's driven by something deeper, usually unconscious, something we're not aware of. Back then, if someone had told me you're traumatized, I would have said, bullshit. No, I'm not. I'm fine.
Yeah.
No.
And I think that's perfect to flow on with as well. Like the core of what I guess we now teach and preach these days is exactly that. Like we want to approach addiction through this lens of trauma. And, like what Matt explained right there is what you would call like a very distinctive, like acute experience and acute trauma, right? Like very overt experience of like, holy shit, I found someone I deeply care about dead. It's, traumatic experience where a lot of what I've explored and going back through similar somatic experiences as Matt was describing, for me was what we'd call developmental trauma, and I think it's not spoken about enough. There's a stigma that can be attached to this word trauma. We think that they have to be these big catastrophic events that play out in our life, and from my experience and what I've noticed with my own journey is that it actually hasn't been that at all. It's been these much more subtle and nuanced and what we would call like covert experiences of developmental trauma, which is really just not getting your basic human needs met in the way that you wanted and needed them met as a child. And for me, from some of these experiences, I've gone back to like literally like in the womb, where my mum was 40 years old, right? So as a baby, like we can only attune and regulate to our primary caregivers, which is usually our mother. And so I've gone back to like literally being in the womb, and I felt my mum's fucking fear. She was 40 years old when she had me and had 2 miscarriages before that. And so you could imagine her as this 40-year-old mother who's had 2 miscarriages, just so fucking scared and terrified of losing me, of me literally dying. I'm feeling and picking up on that fear and that terror. And so I'm basically attuning my nervous system to her dysregulation. And so you can, like, as soon as I started to feel my way through this, I was like, fuck me. No wonder I became a fucking addict. No wonder I turned to drugs and alcohol, because from the day dot, before I was even born into this world, that was what my nervous system was responding to.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then not only that, another layer to that was that once I was born, what I could feel, the energy I was feeling from my mums, we're little sponges as kids, right? We're feeling everything that our primary caregivers are feeling. Was that I could feel from her this energy of like, I need you, was the energy I was feeling. So, you know, this is all unconscious on her behalf. But she would consciously say to this day, 100%, like, I loved you absolutely unconditionally. But my experience was feeling the complete opposite. I was experiencing the definition of conditional love from my mum. And so I'm constantly trying to figure out and seek and find out who I needed to be, or who I needed to contort myself into in order to receive her love. And so these processes and experience start to embed these core wounds, or what we call these like deficiency stories of basically, I'm just not fucking good enough, or I'm not loved as I am. And I start to believe that for the rest of my life. And that creates these trapped and stored energies and emotions in my system that I've got no fucking clue how to be with, how to deal with, how to cope with, how to feel, how to regulate. And my nervous system's like fucking just jacked.
So, you know,
I wonder the first time I reached out for fucking weed at like 11, I was like, oh, fuck. What were you saying, Matt?
Oh, I was going to say, you know, it creates like adaptations. You know, we contort our personality and our authenticity in order to receive love and approval and maintain some sort of connection with our caregivers. And that works on the part of the brain that governs survival, because our caregivers are our source of survival. So it works in the limbic system and the lizard brain, and it goes deeper than our frontal cortex. And that's the area where addiction plays out in our survival physiology. That's why you can't stop with willpower, because survival physiology trumps willpower. You know, it's like why you can't go underwater and drown yourself just by sheer will, because your survival instinct will kick in and you'll go up and take a breath. That's why you have to tie a cinder block to your legs or something. But you know, it's that's the quadrants where addiction plays out. And you know, it, like trauma, it has a lot of connotation with the word. People have their ideas. They think of sexual abuse, war, you know, so like witnessing a murder, something hectic. But like Drew said, it can be the little t traumas, the little stresses in everyday life that build up in the nervous system, and they result in, you know, PTSD symptoms. I don't think it's PTSD, because it's that, you know, that says disorder. It's not a disorder. It's a wounding, but it ends up in the same thing. You know, your nervous system becomes dysregulated in the same way as someone who's been through a catastrophic event. It's actually much more insidious because it's repetition and it happens over time. So it's much harder to resolve and goes much deeper. So our whole identity and personality becomes oriented around survival. And when a personality is oriented around survival and adapting trading authenticity for attachment and connection and love, then it dysregulates the nervous system. And then we find coping strategies. And, you know, it can, like, just things like, you know, a whole generation did this because doctors told them to do it. Leaving a baby to cry, leaving it alone, saying like, cry it out. You know, when a baby's left to cry, it spikes into its survival and into survival activations like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And it will go through existential terror, existential rage. It'll go through all those survival emotions, and it can't come out of it. So then what happens? It shuts down. It goes into what they call learned helplessness, and it will stop crying. And everyone's like, oh, wow, good. It's learning to self-soothe. But what's happened is it's dissociated. That happening, that's trauma. You know, we then carry that, and we can carry this sense of, you know, fear in us and not know why it's there, like this irrational sense of fear or irrational sense of helplessness, or like these emotions we can't really cognitively make sense of because it may date back to an experience like that that's pre-verbal. And in 12-step, they talk about the God-shaped hole and self-centered fear. They are symptoms of trauma. You know, I don't see this as in conflict with 12-step. I think it's just another piece of the puzzle that makes the picture clearer. It's like, why do we experience this disconnect from ourselves, this hole, this void? Why do we experience this irrational fear, self-centered fear? And that's a symptom of a nervous system that has been traumatized. And I think
guys, you know,
piece.
Sure. It's just like for the last 10 minutes or so, we've been talking about, and this spins me out a bit, like we've been talking a lot about trauma. It's all about trauma, and I love that. This is what you two are both experts in. And what I got a bunch of questions here now. First of all, how, like someone in early days of recovery, just getting clean, right? Which is a lot of our audience, certainly, as well. Like for me, and I heard you say, Matt, that you were in 12-step recovery for a couple of years. I'm not sure how long or what exactly it was for you, Drew, but how long? Like, you're talking really sensible, understanding yourself kind of stuff here when we're talking about this trauma. You surely, or can you? You can't just put down the drugs and just start understanding this stuff, can you? Like, for me, it took, I guess I just needed to survive first. I just needed to put down the drugs. I needed to focus on the present moment before I could start looking into the trauma. And actually, in a lot of ways, I don't address, well, I do address the trauma, but I guess I do it very differently. And I'm really interested in hearing both your stories around this stuff. I love how much understanding you guys have got about self around this stuff. We've given some great analogies of, it's funny that Matt, you two spoke about the hug from mum, and then we also heard from Drew talking about his mum, him being in the wound. It's very closely aligned. But first of all, when do you reckon both of you started to understand some of this stuff? Because if anyone's out there listening, and people who are just trying to get clean and save their life, first of all, like how do we get from putting down the drugs to starting to understand some of that trauma, if anyone even does?
Look,
Drew?
like,
Matt,
go. All right, well, so I think like we can start to gain a cognitive understanding and insight even while we're using. You know, we can start to see, wow, like this is why I'm using, and it can actually help us have a bit more compassion for ourselves. You know, because it's like, oh, you know, I'm using because of this. You know, it's not like I'm just a fucking terrible person with moral failings. You know, having insight into how my experiences shaped these behaviors, it can be really helpful, and it can relieve a lot of shame, you know, like, oh, these are just survival strategies, just ways I'm coping. When it comes to like deep, like trauma work, I don't do it with people who are still using. You know, I recommend abstinence for almost everyone, you know, like if abstinence or not abstinence is an idea in your mind that, oh, maybe one day I can use, that's a red flag in itself. You know, but like for me, I wouldn't have made it through that first year if I didn't start to work through my trauma. Like it was just too fucking agonizing to be in my own skin. Like I would have relapsed. And I know that's why I relapsed every time I went to rehab. I think I said, 17 times I tried, and I would just hang on every fucking day. Like, and it was agony, and I never made it more than like a couple of weeks, So I personally had to, and I was in I was in 12 step for 2 years. I did 2 meetings a day for like a year. Worked through the steps, had a sponsor, did the whole drill, like immersed myself in that, whilst at the same time I was doing trauma work, 2 hours, I think a week, with the therapist. That's it. That's
Do
how
you,
I did it.
do you reckon that 12-step stuff in the beginning
It was
gave
essential
you? Yeah, it was essential. Good. I
for
like to
me.
hear that
For me, it was.
because I'm a big believer in for me entirely like total absence is my
Yeah,
only way. And when I say that, it's just because that's my journey, you know what I mean? And I
yeah,
love to share that. But getting clean that way, I tried 49 times. You say 17, I
yeah, yeah,
say
yeah. Right.
49, man. Like so many attempts. All right, that's really good to hear. And I love how you just mentioned even whilst in addiction we can start to use some of that trauma based stuff to sort of understand why we continue using rather than
Yeah,
saying I'm a horrible person, I'm just a piece of shit. Instead, I'm doing this because of this. I really that
yeah,
was really
yeah.
helpful.
Look, like abstinence for me, like I didn't touch anything for 4 years. Like, and then like having a drink started to become like irrelevant, and it was kind of like having a banana or not. And then I had a beer, and it was just nothing, like didn't trigger
Wow.
any kind of compulsion or anything. I'd left 12 step maybe a year before.
Mm.
And look, like it was essential that I went through abstinence. It was essential that I, got the support of the 12 steps community. It was essential that I immersed myself in that space. But like for me, I just started to move in a different direction, one that was more kind of understanding trauma. I became my own exploration. Like I stopped believing a lot of the stuff in 12 step meetings. Like I didn't resonate with some of the dogma,
Like what?
that
Yeah, like what?
like the disease concept, that I'm just got a disease for life. Like that didn't really resonate when I started to really understand how trauma affects our nervous system, and how that plays out in our daily life, how it plays out as compulsion and obsessive thoughts and all that. It was like, well, dis-ease in the sense something's not at ease, I totally resonate with. But this idea that it's like cancer, like a brain disease that's incurable, I stopped resonating with those kind of concepts. And I didn't resonate with some of the ideas that were being told to me that would really elicit a fear of using. It was like, if you use, you're going to die. If you use once, if you have one drink, you lose all your clean days and you're back to square one and you relapse. Like I found those kind of unhelpful. I found they could embed a kind of sense of shame. It's like it was scaring me into not using, rather than a sense of freedom. Like it's just a choice I'm making to not use. Like I haven't touched alcohol in over a year, but it's like it didn't feel like a choice. It felt like an aversion, at a certain point. Like it felt like I was scared of it, and like I wanted to explore whether that was true for me. And look, like I would never recommend anyone do that, especially if they run an abstinence-based program, because like the amount of times, and I've seen people do that and then end up in full-blown relapse.
Absolutely, Matt. Yeah, like
Yeah.
I just want to quickly throw in there, like for me, yeah, all of that stuff you just mentioned really works, but like, and like, and it is fear based. But Danny, if you have a drink, you're gonna die. Like that really works for me. I'm happy to say that for the rest of my life. If I have a drink, I'm a good chance of dying because I've seen it, mate. I've seen people relapse after 25 years and be found in their bathroom, unconscious by their children from a heroin, from a needle sticking out of them, because they had too many oxycontins because of an injury. So it's just yeah, I feel that.
Yeah,
But
I know. Yeah.
but what I have learned, and this is what's so important about this conversation, is that it's different for everybody, And I guess at the end of the day, we need to choose our own path and what exactly is, and through our own experiences too. And I think what you two guys are sharing here is really important, because one of the things crazy that I've learned in the last 12 months of being quite active in this sort of online presence is that everyone has different journeys. There's so many other forms of recovery out there, and I love that you guys can
Yeah.
share this stuff.
That's the important thing, you know. And I think like if as soon as we start believing our way is the only way and we project onto everyone else, we become like religions fighting against each other.
Yeah,
And
totally.
it's not
Love that,
helpful for
yes.
anyone. Like,
Yeah,
and that's
no,
why I
it's
try
not.
to be inclusive in my approach. You know, it's like I don't see trauma work as contradictory to 12-step. You know, I don't see what Gabor Mate teaches as the opposite to 12-step. I think they can coexist and intertwine and have a lot of similarities. And I think like as a fucking culture overall, like we need more inclusivity rather than division. It's like
Yeah,
everything we're fucking
yeah,
doing these days is about division. It's, you know, it's not
yeah.
subject to
Drew,
just the recovery phase.
for sure. Drew, what do you think, Drew?
Look, similar rhetoric to Matt. I think for me, in the early days and phases, you know, a 12-step was the only option I was given. That's the truth.
Yeah,
And so, you know, if that's the only option I was given and then presented with, then of course I was going to run at that because that's how hungry I was to make some changes and shifts in my life. And you know, there was a very distinctive tipping point in my life that I just knew I've always had a deep connection just to that, you know, whatever you want to call it, just that deep knowing within that intuition, whatever people want to call that, connection to higher power, connection to something bigger than self, and that was guiding me towards that there's actually something more to this. You know, it was I got to a point with like, what else is there? You know, I love the elements of community. I love the elements of connection.
yeah, that's
I loved
important.
having a safe space, you know, safe space just to share and be heard and to listen. But similar to Matt, you know, there were just a few pillars that I didn't completely feel true with. Like I any words that follow I am, you know, I am some of the most powerful words you can speak. And I didn't believe that I don't identify as an alcoholic. I don't identify as an addict. That didn't support me at the time. You know, I'm so much more than that. And same with Matt. It was like I didn't. There was something in me that was just like, I don't believe I have a disease. And actually, what I noticed in myself was that was stopping me from looking a little bit deeper under the surface. There was a part of me which I can just call, you know, maybe for want of a better word, but my ego that loved the idea of it potentially being a disease because it meant I actually didn't need to look any deeper than that. It was like, oh, I've just got a disease for which there's no known cure. And so there was a part of me that, you know, everyone's got this part that doesn't actually really want to necessarily look underneath the hood. Because that creates a sense of safety, and any sense of growth or expansion is a threat to that sense of safety or familiarity. And so that was there was like this glass ceiling that was like, oh, I can run with that because it stops me taking a look at potentially what's creating these compulsions in my body. And so, like Matt, like I still send clients regularly to meetings. I still send clients to 12 steps. Like I've got absolutely no problem with it at its core. I think it's pretty phenomenal program that's, you know, two men, you know, created fucking over 80 years ago. And for me and my journey, I craved and desired something a little bit deeper. I wanted to explore this a little bit further. I really wanted to understand the crux of that compulsion so I could get to this point where I am today. Like Matt said, I can look at a drink, I can look at a fucking, you know, whatever. I can be in spaces where people are potentially drinking, even using, you know, go to fucking festivals, I go to gigs, I still, you know, can potentially sometimes be surrounded by these behaviors. And there's no compulsion, there's no desire to want to engage in these old behaviors in the way that I used to because I've dug them out at the fucking root.
Drew, I actually speak to a lot of people on a regular basis, and I don't know if you must hear this message too, but I hear from people with 10 years abstinence, right, all the time, and I've got a feeling I know your response to this, but that they still are craving, like you just spoke about, not having that craving and feeling comfortable in those environments, right, but yet people with 10 years up, I hear all the time are unhappy. Like it sounds like you two feel quite and actually I don't know, but quite content with your lives. I do where I'm at. But how do you get from like the person even with 20 years that's still struggling and wants to fill the hole, the God-shaped hole, as Matt mentioned earlier? What's the difference between you and them? Like Yeah.
Look,
I
like
want-
for me, you know, I tried just 12-step for years. You know, I was on methadone for 7 years, in and out of 12-step, and then I'd go and get off methadone or off whatever I was using, and I tried just 12-step, and it wasn't enough for me. You know, and I know it. So many people who have just done 12-step programs, but then I know a lot of people who have done 12-step programs plus a whole lot of other work. And I think it's like the difference between a dry drunk, you know, and someone who's actually in recovery, you know, like someone who's doing a lot of
Totally.
inner work.
Yeah.
Like I know plenty of people who are 20, 30 years clean, sleeping with every newcomer that comes in, like they're just fucking sex addicts, or they're, you know, obsessed with the gym and self-image. Like they don't have any
Yeah.
kind of inner self-esteem. It's all external. They're still seeking validation. They still have
Sure.
huge rage outbursts, like uncontained rage. They and like, look, it's just goes to show you, like, if you take the drug away, it's you're still left with all the shit that the drug was helping you cope with. And you know, for me, 12-step didn't address that. 12-step helped me put down the drug, and it helped give me a community. Even the steps, you know, it gave me awareness around a lot of the patterns, but it didn't discharge the patterns. It somewhat gave me a choice, you know, but when the compulsions really were arising, like I didn't have a choice, because it was just so overwhelming, like a lit match thrown on petrol and someone saying, all right, just sit there and be aware of it. It's like, no, my whole fucking system's going to start running, you know? And so it helped give me awareness, but you know, I think you can still be very sick and clean, you know, like you can still have a lot of the same stuff
of
that was
course.
there and not be
Yeah.
using, you know, the drugs is just the lid, really.
I was talking to someone about this the other day. Like I've seen this happen a lot for people that just go, let's say, clean or sober, or just let go of their vice or choice, or their particular coping mechanism, whatever that may be, and don't learn how to ultimately, you know, regulate the nervous system in some way, shape, or form, or start to free themselves from these anchor points, or these imprints of these you know, sort of traumatic imprints, as we talk about. What you start to notice is they actually go a fuckload more insane than they actually were on the fucking drugs and the alcohol. Because all of a sudden you've taken away their pacifier, right? You've taken away the one thing that's actually helping them to cope and deal with all the shit under the surface, just like Matt said. And so you'll see these you know, these sort of this inability to know how to just be with what's present in their body, and all of a sudden that can create a whole nother world of fucking hell. And this is the difference between this, just trying to fucking white knuckle yourself through potentially going some form of cold turkey, and then actually looking at the underlying fuel source that was creating that in the first place.
And people do that in different ways, you know, like it doesn't have to be just somatic trauma therapy. You know, people start to look at their patterns and stuff in their own way, and like everyone, like you said earlier, Danny, it is different for everyone. Like there is no one size fits all, and I think it can change as well. Like for me, 12-step was so essential, whilst at the same time it was trauma work. Then 12-step fell away and the trauma work continued, you know, and now it's just all about trauma work. Also, like a really important aspect is like a spiritual kind of connection, you know, like keeping up my meditation and my yoga and self-inquiry and those kind of
For
things.
sure,
Connection to a
definitely.
deeper kind of spiritual dimension, you know, and an experiential one, not just the belief that I have. Like it had to be really experiential. It was like, I'm not going to believe in God because someone fucking told me he exists, or because I'm told to hand my will over, you know. It's like, for me, I had to literally experience it, you know. And when I experienced it, it stopped being a belief. It was like, oh no, I know it's true now, you know, because it's something that I experience. And so having that dimension was really important. And some people, they go to an ashram and get a direct line, an experiential line, and they stop using. That's enough for them, you know. And like, I think, like, yeah, just like you said, it is different for everyone. And if we're not open-minded in our approach, like they say that in 12-step too, be open-minded, you know. If we're not open-minded, that it is going to be different for everyone. and people are going to resonate with different things because we all have different constitutions, different makeups, different ways we're conditioned. Then we're going to limit, and we might be robbing someone of having their own experience at the same time.
Matt, I was just seeing something in the comments. I'd love you to touch on. I love the way you speak about this when people say that drugs in themselves are inherently addictive.
Look, like you can,
or alcohol in itself is inherently addictive.
Well, I don't know. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I know opiates, they have the hook because we've got natural opioids. Then our body becomes physically addicted. But if you give someone, opiates in the hospital and they don't have those addictive tendencies, they don't have the trauma, the dysregulation, they don't experience the same relief that we do, And so someone's lying in the hospital bed, has a broken leg, is shot with morphine for 2 weeks. They stop using it, they'll get the physical symptoms. They'll get the nose running, they'll get the yawns, they'll get the aches, kind of like a flu, but they won't get that, oh, I need more. There's a difference, between something that's physically addictive and a compulsion to use it.
Yeah, it's crazy, but isn't it? Like, yeah, in my head, the only way my head can possibly think is how could they not want more? That's the addicts. But I truly believe that. All right, guys. Sorry, Drew. What was that?
I just saw in a video the other day, again, Gable Mate was sharing in a talk. He's saying, like, if I experience a level of social anxiety and then I go, to a party and I have a drink of whiskey and all of a sudden I feel like I can engage and feel a deeper level of connection. It's like, is the anxiety the issue, or is it a lack of whiskey in my brain? And when he shared that, you could see everyone just like kind of nodding and shit. Fuck, that makes sense.
So I agree. Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Matt?
I was gonna say, in that scenario, the issue is the fact I feel disconnected and I don't feel safe being myself. So the drug becomes the remedy for that. That's kind of not that we get. It's like I used to be the dude with my hood on in the club, staring, like knife down my pants, just in fucking full blown threat mode, like ready for anything to kick off at any moment. And then I'd eat a couple of Xannies and have a few drinks, and I'd be out like fucking a mess, sloppy as, But if I didn't have those in my system, I'd just be this fucking like wigged out, paranoid, like terrified. The knife's like a protection strategy. No, so much shame, like wanting to hide my face, just fucking staring at people. Like that's so disconnecting. So disconnecting. Everyone's a threat. But then I take a few substances, whatever that may be, and I can connect with people. I can be myself. That hyper arousal and activation in my system softens. So the issue is the fact I'm disconnected, that I feel threatened, and I'm that way because of my experience with life and my experience growing up.
I was the same with Matt, but just, same, but different. It was like I had always experienced love from a conditional place, that adaptation had become that I had to seek that love, attention, and approval from everybody else. So I'd walk into rooms looking for like, what mask do I need to be today? Or, it's like a fucking walking chameleon. What suit am I putting on today in order to blend in, to fit in, to be loved, to be liked, and to be approved of in any given situation? And what helped that a lot of the time was the fucking drugs and the alcohol.
Yeah, for me, I think the way I kind of break all of this stuff down to like around that is, I used to be scared, of course. I had a lot of fear, and it was because I had no idea on how to be brave and have courage without drugs and alcohol, I guess. And today in recovery, and for me, it's just about trying to practice some of that courage and step out of that fear too. And like the drugs gave me a false sense of security with not feeling confident with myself in any way. And I love what Matt said earlier about the hug from mum. I often refer to it as my little security blanket that I
That's
get.
it.
The methadone was my code.
Yeah. It's a buffer, It's a buffer between you and life. It's like, especially methadone. It's like
just a constant glow for 13 years. So, guys, let's touch a little bit on what's the line in the sand. I mean, at the beginning of this show we had a little short intro there, and I seen something line in the sand. I know you guys are working in this trauma space and like it's and recovery. Can you talk to me a little bit about what's line in the sand and what are you guys doing with this?
Do you want to take it, Drew, or do you want?
Yeah, for
you
sure.
go?
We can both touch on this. Look, this is just a culmination of myself, Matt, and our other partner Ryan, who had basically the exact same experiences. You know, we got plugged into different systems that we didn't feel completely supported us in the way that we really needed. And we really wanted to start to create a place where people could land where, you know, whether they just didn't resonate with some of the systems they were getting plugged into right now, or they were already, you know, they were at a level of recovery where they knew they wanted something more and they wanted to start to explore and expand a little bit deeper, that they could come into a space and start to arm themselves with some real practical, sustainable is really the key and the crux of this: tools, practices, and principles that were really going to start to change the way in which they can navigate life through the lens of trauma. So starting to learn how to ultimately house and hold some of these, the cause drivers of what was creating these compulsions in the first place, and just start to deepen their experience of whatever they deem to be their own recovery.
Cool.
You know, this was always what I felt was missing. There was nothing like this even available, even if I wanted it. You know, even when I started exploring and making this correlation and connection between addiction and trauma, like I didn't know where to go. I didn't know where to turn to. You know, I fumbled around the dark for, you know, probably a good six years, you know, trying to piece all these bits of the puzzle together. And I know Ryan did, and I definitely know, you know, Matt had a somewhat similar experience. And so we came together and we're just like, guys, like, you know, we had a vision, we had a plan, and we'd found something that had really, really deeply supported us in taking our journey to a whole nother level and experience. And we're like, you know, we want to give people the opportunity to experience this for themselves. And so it's just three like-minded dudes being like, fuck, like let's give them a place to land.
Like, you know, it's like my vision with it is that it's not against any other form of recovery, but it can be used in conjunction with other forms of recovery. So, you know, someone who's in the 12-step program and abstinent, it's like they can stay in the 12-step program and be completely abstinent. Like that's encouraged, you know, almost. And, you know, like that they can then go through this program and deepen their recovery, start to gain deeper understandings into some of their personality traits, you know, why they're a love avoidant, why they're, you know, have attachment issues, why they keep repeating the same relationship cycles over and over, why they, you know, feel the need to reach for something to eat all the time, why they're obsessed with the gym. You know, we can start to explore this if we look at the desire of the goal. I don't like really things being goal oriented, but of recovery is freedom. You know, we can be free from the drugs, but for a lot of people, that's not enough. You know, I want freedom from myself, you know, because what was I doing when I was using? What would drugs do? What would I get when I'd be between unconscious and dead, when I'd have a shot of heroin? I'd be free of myself, you know, of the suffering personality, the fucking inner friction and torment. And if we're still experiencing that, you know, you know, there wasn't much we could do about it previously, maybe coping strategies, but we can start to learn about it, investigate it, explore it, start to metabolize some of the wounds that are driving it, start to see what's, like Drew said, underneath the hood. And we start to get more and more freedom. And I don't think there's a point where we reach where it's like, we're totally free forever. I think it's ongoing refinement. You know, we become the object of our exploration, and life becomes like this process of ceaseless discovery. Like I start seeing more things about myself. And, you know, just like on the topic of relapse, like relapse doesn't have to be like a negative thing. You know, it's just something more I have to explore. You know, when we take this inquiring attitude and looking at ourselves and kind of introception, you know, we take a curious attitude to our patterns and why we do what we do, and, you know, the way our personality adapted and all that. So it's like, it's a form of recovery that can blend in with all the other types of recovery, you know. It's a way to deepen, really, you know.
And I think what's also really important, Danny, is to highlight is that we cater to the full spectrum of addiction. We don't believe there to be any like separation. We don't need to treat someone who uses drugs any differently to someone who overworks, or someone who potentially overeats, or someone who's addicted to porn.
So it doesn't have to
one
be
of the
drugs, you're saying,
Not
yeah.
at all, not
Yeah,
even
yeah.
close. Like the core pillar of actually
It's
what
really
we
good.
sort of teach and preach is that the thing isn't the thing. And so we cater to the full
The
spectrum
thing
of,
isn't the thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. That's
Yeah, I
like been
like
one of
it.
those like core pieces of my
Yeah.
message for years, is that the thing is the thing. Stop looking at the thing, stop looking at the symptom, and let's start looking at what's underneath that. Because the reality is, bro, every single human on this planet has some form of a vice or some way to distract when they just simply don't want to feel or be in their full
So,
experience of life. And that can come in the form of overworking, overeating, over exercising, fucking
Scrolling.
porn, scrolling, social media, gaming. I give talks regularly to like what we'd call like, in this recovery space, maybe a more mainstream audience, or like normies, right? And I don't
yeah.
believe there to be any separation between addiction and distraction. They're
Yeah.
synonymous. They're one and the same. And so I'll start my talk by like, put your hands up if you identify as like an addict or an alcoholic. And very rarely does a hand go up in the room, right? And I'll eventually get to this question of like, right, now put your hand up if you know that you have something in your life that you turn to when you just don't want to simply feel. Or there's a bit of a stress in your life and you're finding it hard to cope. And you'll see every single hand in the room go up. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'll just
The phone.
I'll just tell a story, that I hear from so many parents, and was my mum's experience too. When I was out using, say, living in the flats, shooting heroin, all that, my mum said she, and other parents, like, I lay awake at night in my bedroom, like terrified, and they, will ring their kid, and then as soon as they pick up their kid, the kid gets in the car, their nervous system would relax. That's the same.
Yeah.
There's the warm blanket, it's as the hug from
Yeah.
mum. They know their
Yeah.
child is safe. So therefore they start to adapt and have a behavior of trying to rescue, their child, out of their addiction. They start trying to control, and that's addiction. That is the same addiction, because when they feel in control, their nervous system relax. What does heroin do aside from make you feel in control? It helps regulate you out of that pain. You feel relieved, and when like their child gets in the car, they're relieved, and then unconsciously they seek that moment over and over and over again. And so addiction's playing out like on a collective scale, on an individual scale, on a cultural scale. It's like we're all addicted in different ways. We're all seeking that moment. It's like you save up and buy a new car, you sit in the car, like I did it, something relaxes, that whole time building up to that moment. I'm in a state of like desirelessness, I can rest with myself. And then it starts to get not good enough, and they bring out a new model, and I get that uncomfortability again. And then I start saving. I fucking need to get the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. That's addiction, and it's everywhere.
Yeah.
But there's like stage 5 addiction and stage 1 addiction. Some people need to be between unconscious and dead to feel okay. Other people just need to have like, a few $1,000s in the bank to feel okay.
Yeah.
But it's all that seeking of relief, of safety, of security, of that warm blanket. If you've got more money in the bank, there is a sense of like, having more security, like there's a buffer there, there's something you can fall back on. And so, there's a quote, all of man's problems stem from his inability to sit in a room by himself with no distractions without going crazy. And it's like all of us are doing it in our own way. It's not subject to just drug addicts, even just and alcoholics. It's the consequences are more drastic,
And Danny, when we can see addiction through this lens, we really start to tear apart any stigma attached to that word, because there is a lot of stigma attached to that word: addict, addiction, alcoholism, whatever that is. We can start to see it through the frame and the lens that this is actually a global phenomenon. And then with that, we spoke about this before, we can start to hold each and every single person that's having this experience with a fuckload more compassion and a hell of a lot more understanding.
So good. And look, that's one of the things I've noticed through the work that I do, certainly online, is I have this opportunity to keep breaking down some of those barriers and the stigma, because I very freely just share my stories, and result of doing that, a lot of other people reach out and share some of their stories. And when people start to share their stories, immediately they get this relief because they've kind of normalized it somewhat. And I guess
Yeah.
that's all closely aligned with what you talk. Let me just ask you both something. I got this little saying. I think I came up with this, but it's like the drugs are not my problem. You know, it's my inability to live life on life's terms without the use of a drug. That's my problem. Is that like when I say that? I wonder. So the drugs aren't the problem. I'm the problem. Is what I'm saying.
Mm.
Is that aligned to what you're saying, or is what you're saying a little bit different?
It's completely
Yeah.
aligned, but I
Yeah,
suppose
same, eh?
where we're going with this is like, why am I so fucking
Yeah.
uncomfortable with
Yeah,
myself?
sure. Yeah, I
You
need to
know,
work out why I'm the problem
yeah,
rather than just
looking at
filling
the
it.
problem, you know, like exploring
Yeah.
it. Why does it feel so uncomfortable to be me? And it comes back to, you know, stored stress, you know, undischarged life experience, unmetabolized life experience that's stuck inside of
Yeah, for
us.
sure.
And, you know, and as like we feel into it, you know, it's like, oh, that's the fucking uncomfortability. That's why I can't sit
Yeah.
with myself in a room with no distractions.
And can I just say to anyone out there listening to, like, I love who I am today. Absolutely, I'm blessed, very blessed to be 13 years, 5 months free from drugs and alcohol, and I have done a lot of work, and I feel like a lot of trauma work through the 12 steps. Personally, I reckon the 12 steps are like instructions on how to live, you know. But I love that coming in this space to there's so many people that have got problems with the 12 steps, and we need solutions for people who just can't fit into one space. And this is exactly what you guys have touched on, and I think it's so critically important to be able to have what do you call it, options for people
Yeah.
too. And that's what we're talking
Yeah.
about here.
Yeah, we're
And
not
I
in
love that you
conjunction with any other ways, man. Like it's like just
nah
find what works for
yeah
you.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you
Even
want
if
to
it's more than one thing, you know, like for me,
100%.
it's been more than one thing, and it changes, transforms. It's
Yeah.
still.
so how can guys find out a bit more about what you're doing with Line in the Sand and get some more help from you guys?
Best place to land is just head through to our website, which is LITS, so the abbreviation of Line in the Sand, so litsrecovery.com.
Let me
And if you
L
type
I
that in the
T
comments, I
S.
can go straight. litsrecovery.com. On that page as well, we've got a bit of a quiz that you can take yourself through just to, you know, sort of screen whether this is something that's going to be appropriate for you, it's going to serve you. We've also got a free masterclass you can sign up to and get a bit more like just conceptual understanding of the way that we approach this. We've got a full outlay of the program that we take you through. And yeah, any and all information is on there. And then if you need anything further than that, we've got contacts on the website, or you can literally just reach out to me personally on Instagram. Message me at Drew_Wild. Like I'm engaged with so many people, just like you, Danny, on your socials. I'm just as engaged over on mine, regularly,
Good, man.
daily, reaching out to, you know, and communicating with people, you know, in that struggle today, and parents and families of as well, on a consistent daily basis. So if you do want a touch point, a more personal touch point, just message me on Instagram.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much, Drew. Thank Matt, and Drew, thank you so much for sharing your stories. And look, mate, honestly, like I've never spoken so much about trauma. Like for some reason, I'm just like I'm this real kind of guy who focuses on now. And I understand, like for me, now really works. And I've very gently addressed a lot of stuff over my 13 years of recovery. But I even went to uni for 3 years to learn about counseling. And I realized that I don't want to be talking through people's trauma. I'm way too sensitive a person. I've got a beautiful 5-year-old daughter who lives in that room there. As soon as somebody talks about childhood stuff, I go into like this. I guess this is more trauma, but I go into like I'm way too sensitive. I don't need to know your trauma, but that's just my standpoint, you know. And but I know we need to work through this stuff. Absolutely. So
I don't see trauma as working through trauma as contradictory to living in the present moment, because trauma is stored in our bodies. I can only actually feel the pain that I didn't feel 20 years ago. I can only feel it now. So I can only come into the present moment, feel it in my body right now. It's actually a practice. Trauma work is a practice of present moment awareness.
For sure. Yeah, beautiful. Agreed. All right, guys, do you want to guys, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We do have a few comments and questions. If anyone has any questions or make any comments for Drew and for Matt, please go ahead and drop your comments. We'll just go back through some of these comments. I don't know if you guys can see up there on the screen. If anyone, I'll highlight them up. First, I just want to start with Lucille. Yes, I did AA for years. Then my life shifted and I prayed out to God in a jail cell. And since then, I haven't had the urge. It's a constant journey of change and accepting where we're at. Thank you, Lucille. And Kerry, do you guys know Kerry? Kerry's an absolute legend. Learning to be comfortable with myself. That's so true. The ultimate question for anyone battling addictions is learning how that is very freeing. Yes. Let me know if there's any questions I should highlight here, guys. Yes, Lucille mentioned she loved the analogy around the baby and the mother. That was gold from both of you. How did you guys set that up?
And that was what a vodka bottle was for me, you know? It was like, as soon as it was like, and I've actually had this experience with one of my own teachers. It's like that putting the bottle in my mouth felt no different to when I was a child putting a bottle of milk in my mouth. The bottle of vodka had the exact same response.
Yeah, I heard you use the term pacifier earlier, Drew. As learning to sit with pain in the beginning of healing. Great stuff, guys. Yeah, absolutely, Kerry. Their community. This was in relation to the babies. This is when you were saying that. I think, Matt, about the baby crying. Was it you or Drew? That really hit home. Like, so what you're saying with the baby, leaving the baby to cry, is a form of, what is it? You're saying that.
Look, like you can say it's abuse even, but it's not. It's not done with ill intentions. You know, it's not done like a perpetrator trying to abuse someone. It's done because they're told that's the best thing for the baby. But if you look at all other mammals, they don't put their babies down. Even other cultures, it's a real Western thing. And other cultures, you know, Eastern cultures, they're shocked and horrified that we leave our babies in a separate room.
Well, I could never do it. I've never done it to my kid. I'm such, and I've got to be also aware that you got to give it a little bit of space too. Surely you can't. But anyway, I'm like,
it's different to smothering, but you know, like you don't you know, like just leaving them to cry, leaving a baby alone, you know, it creates like an abandonment wound, a very early abandonment wound.
I love what Carla just said, you know, neglect without the intent. There's no malintent,
exactly.
There's no malicious intent. Still neglect nonetheless.
Neglect without the intent, still neglect. Hey, Andrew, I love your work, guys. Guys, if anyone's got any questions, drop them now.
Well, that's you know, the baby thing. It's like, well, if I'm left to cry as a baby, all I want in that moment is a hug from my mum. And then when I'm an adult using heroin, I'm seeking a hug from my mum. You know, it's the warm blanket, the warm hug that I didn't get as a baby. You know.
Wow.
What a lot of this work. There you go, Matt.
I was going to say, it's like, you know, people would look at my values when I was using and saying, like, oh, your life's fucked. You just value drugs and crime and you don't value yourself. Rah, rah. But if you look on that deeper level, if heroin is like a hug from mum, what am I really valuing? I'm valuing the feeling of being loved, of being held. You know, that's what was the orienting principle of my using, you know, wanting to feel held like a fucking screaming baby, you know?
Guys, I just put the link up there. You can see that's to find out more information from Drew and Matt.
I saw someone said you're doing well not swearing. Like I've been.
Thank you.
I didn't know we were doing that.
I was actually or I was like, this is probably the least I've ever sworn on a podcast.
Yeah,
ever.
do you know, guys, on that actually, like this is really interesting. Swearing is a big part of the way I carry my message, and just funny, right? Through my podcast, even the name of my podcast, I had a couple of God people reach out to me and say, Danny, we love what you're doing. You carry such a beautiful message. I just want to let you know that because of the swearing and stuff, I'm unable to show it in my school here or here there.
We had that the other day too. Yeah.
And I thought the first time you called me a monkey once, you called me monkey twice, 3 times I'm started eating bananas, so I've tried to stop swearing. I'm just trialing it. I'm not, but it's actually been so hard to stop
Yeah.
swearing, but I'm so aware of it now. Like I don't know if I have even sworn once through this interview, and thank you for noticing that. I think it was Kerry that said it. It's actually so difficult, and I feel like I can't completely get my message across without swearing, but it's not true.
Yeah. Well, for me, it feels like it's been so part of the culture that I've been immersed in my whole life, swearing. And when someone doesn't have that and they have like a more anal attitude, there's less resonance for me. You know, swearing, I can feel like, oh, it's safe to be me. You know, it's safe to just sort of swear and stuff. So I like the depth swearing adds to these kind of conversations.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, I will be swearing again. I'm pretty sure. I've just said 1 month. I can't wait till a month's up. I'm going to just start swearing. But maybe in that month I'll change my. Who knows? Maybe I'll start changing some of the patterns. Kerry, I could not have stayed sober for 41 years without the 12-step program. Far out, Kerry. I thought you were saying you've stayed sober without it. I thought so, Kerry. Thank you for sharing that. 41 years sober from Kerry. What an absolute legend. You guys should connect actually, Kerry, with these boys. Kerry does. She's got a show also.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Is there another comment down here? I swear I run groups. Oh, hang on. I swear when I run groups, like, yeah, don't worry, Carla, me too, mate.
If you're in any of most spaces, you're gonna get used to it. Some
cool.
some very colourful language.
Yeah, but do you know what? Like, if you hear a piece of feedback, and this is about being open-minded. Like, I got told by 3 different people, pretty much within a couple of days, that my swearing was having some effects. I thought, you know what, I'm going to try not to do it. And that's just life in general. I like to think I've got an open mind and I'm going to give anything a crack because, like, it's just about how important is being open-minded, you know?
Yeah.
That's everything.
Absolutely.
Everything. And just starting to decipher what's your own truth in amongst all that.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
What's my authentic version? Like for me, I think actually to be my authentic self includes a fucking shitload of blasphemy. And I'm okay with that. You know, it's integrated. I'm like, I get to own that part of me. And that'll relate to some people and it won't to others. And I'm completely okay with that.
And maybe you'll change that too, right? You don't know.
Maybe.
Like,
who knows?
Maybe you won't.
Totally. I'm never stuck in so rigid in one viewpoint ever that I don't think anything could ever change.
Yeah, that's blessed. All right, guys. Mate, is there anything else? Did you guys want to leave us some words of wisdom, please, Drew? What would you share to our audience today? Matt, you ever think about this while Drew drops the gold? Any last words of wisdom before we wrap it up, please, Drew?
I think the one thing that always lands for me is like there's a saying that the only way out is through, and I truly believe that the only way through is to feel. So we can start to learn to really truly feel our way throughout life and navigate whatever life throws at us. Ultimately, life is always going to life. Shit happens. It's the reality of being a human being, and what really matters is our capacity and to be with that, to hold that, to house that in our body. So yeah, feel everything.
Yeah, love it, mate. Thanks, thanks, Drew. Matt.
Yeah, I didn't come up with anything. Just like I guess just to emphasize, like the difference between recovery or the way I define the word recovery and being clean, like life can be a process of ceaseless discovery. We can continue to grow and evolve with no end goal, and it's a relief to drop that end goal. where I'm like perfectly recovered or I'm perfectly, free. It's kind of like evolution. It's like it doesn't have an endpoint. It just keeps refining itself. And our lives can kind of be like that. And, we can treat our recovery the same way. It's like we can just continue to evolve, continue to deepen, continue to find more freedom, the more we explore and the more parts of ourselves we welcome back home and accept. It's
Beautiful.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, boys. All right, guys, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Guys, stay in the studio for a sec. I'm going to end the broadcast. Later, guys. Thank you very much.
Peace.
Later. All right.